The following is a presentation of Geekster Media.
Come and knock on our pod, our mini-series that's new. We usually talk about shows that no one knows, maybe this one you do. We're talking Three's Company, Ropers, and Three's crowd to name just a few. Will and Adam, we too have a pod just for you.
Hey there, TV lovers, and welcome to episode 39 of Remember That Show, the podcast where we revisit the obscure or forgotten TV shows of the 80s and 90s. With my lease ending and my new girlfriend suggesting we live in sin, I'm Will.
And I've got to finish cooking these frogs' legs so I could go catch some gnarly waves. I'm Adam.
We're moving the party from the Regal Beagle to Jack's Bistro as our Come and Knock on Our Pod event comes to a close. To wrap things up, we're taking a look at the final installment of the Three's Company universe, the John Ritter starring Three's a Crowd. Before we get into all that, we must first look back at our own TV-obsessed childhoods in a segment we call Theme Song.
Now, a big theme of this show is about making a big change, hoping it's the right direction in which your life should be heading. So, Will, what for you was a pretty big life decision that you remember having to make?
Oh, God, so many. Honestly, working for Diamond, because it was such a setback.
I think we have to stop here, though. For those of our listeners who are not comic book fans, only TV fans, you got to tell them, what is Diamond Distributors?
Okay, so, oh my God, it's almost 20 years ago now. I'm so old. I was a purchasing brand manager on the print team for Diamond Comic Distributors, which was the largest comic distributor in North America. You have to say North America because Japan will be like, no, we beat you. I worked with small press creators, some indie creators, basically any company that wasn't Marvel, DC, or Image. So like my biggest accounts at that time would have been IDW Publishing and Oni Press. They used to publish something called the Previews catalog. It just went digital only like a month ago because Diamond was bankrupt and was purchased, and that's a whole cluster in and of itself. But I always wanted to work in toys. Like, I went to college to make toys, but there was no curriculum for it, and I didn't know what I was doing. So when I graduated, I didn't know where to go. I sent a lot of blind resumes and did a lot of cold calling that went nowhere. So I ended up working in retail at H&M. It's a clothing store. It's a European company. It was retail, minimum wage, that kind of deal. I did that for a year to a year and a half, and then I was a research analyst in commercial real estate. And that's when I started making the money that you expect to make when you graduate from college. It's oh, I can pay rent somewhere and I can take my student loans off forbearance and things like that. And it's I did that job for about 2 years and I have my big boy job and everything. And at some point, I don't even remember how I found out. I saw that Diamond was hiring, and they are located in Maryland, but they are in Timonium, which is outside of Baltimore. I interviewed, and I was a big nerd. I thought that comics would be toy adjacent, because Diamond did have a toy team. I don't know if I had any designs on joining that team. I was fine with the comic side, because I loved comics anyway. So it was oh cool, get to see how the sausage is made, But it was a big decision because I had already worked to get my big boy job and could pay all these bills, and Diamond was 50 miles away, one way, and I was driving this old beater of a car from a police auction, and then I took somewhere between like 7 and 10K pay cut to work for Diamond. Like, and I had to beg to get that. But it's like, oh, you got to make these sacrifices for your dreams. So for about 2 years, I drove 100 miles a day for a pay cut where I couldn't pay those bills anymore and had to actually move back home. But hey, I'm living my dream and everything. And like, it took a while to get back to where I was, you know, like after I went to San Diego in like '07, I felt like I had done everything you could do. Like I had seen career people in that job and they seemed to hate their lives and I didn't want that. So it was like after about 2 years, it's like comics, you've been there, done that. So like then I went back to the commercial real estate and kind of had to make up for lost time. So I mean, I'm glad I did it because I would have wondered like, what if? And I still have a lot of like great friends from that era, but I definitely remember the setbacks. So that's my answer. How about you?
Yeah, so you got to live your dream like Jack Tripper did of opening his restaurant, at least for a time. Well, my big life decision, this is kind of a bookend to, in our first edition of Come and Knock on Our Pod, we were talking, about the first time living away from home and what that was like. So in 2005, I graduated from that junior college. I didn't really move out of my house for a while until I went out of the country. And so I got accepted to an actual out-of-state university, which I never thought would happen, but I had pretty good grades in junior college. So they took me. And I was like, I'm finally growing up. I'm getting on that track where I'm going to be an adult. And so I was deciding, I don't want to travel with a bunch of boxes. I have all this stuff that I've accumulated, all these beloved knickknacks. So I decided to have a garage sale to downsize my life's collection of things. This is my big decision. This is how you grow up. You cast off these childhood things. So the huge collection that was included at the garage sale was my Cracked and Wizard magazines, stuff that I just bought for years and years and had accumulated. My original Game Boy and all my games, my beloved vintage Kiss belt buckle from the 70s that I wore all the time. I even wore it to a job interview, and the interviewer said, you realize you're wearing a Kiss belt buckle, right? And also most of my VHS tapes, including the majority of my home recorded tapes from the 80s, all the TV movies and cartoons and all this stuff. I saved a few. I was like, I cannot get rid of all of these. That I could not let go of, but I wish I had so many of them. Anyway, I only attended that college for about a month before I ran out of money and had to move back to California anyway. So I did not plan well. I didn't think about financing and taking out student loans or any of that. I just figured, yeah, I'll find a job and then I'll be able probably just like to pay some rent and all this stuff. I was not ready to be an adult still. And so I have totally failed. I wasn't ready for higher education either. Let me just put it that way. Like sitting in those classes, I was just like, oh, junior college did not prepare me for this. So I wasn't going to make it either way. But it ended up then being a big pointless purge of things from my childhood that I still wish I had with me today. And the only upside at the end of the day was that the loss of my Wizard magazines became the impetus for me to start Wizards, the podcast guide to comics, which has been a wild and very fulfilling adventure. So that stupid life decision eventually paid off in some way.
That's great. There's so many like I'm putting like thumbtacks in your story of like, we need to revisit this later. Like, Kiss belt buckle, please tell me you got that job. Or you just said like rock on and walked out the door.
Well, I do have to tell you this. The Kiss belt buckle story was on the coattails of my friend's job, who was working at the Princeton Review. If anybody went to college and did have ambition for higher education, they trained you how to take the SAT test, which I just showed up and said, I'm going to know what I know and I'll take the test. That's what it's supposed to be, right? But people learn all these tricks. So he was a tutor for the Princeton Review. So I thought, if he did it, I can do it, but I totally would not have been qualified. And they were clear in the interview, like that was just like the cherry on top. They're like, and you're wearing a Kiss belt buckle. You realize you're not getting this job, right? That was really what they were saying. Like, you don't understand the real world, I think.
Spoiler alert, the SAT means nothing. All you kids out there listening, just rack up a bunch of extracurriculars. I'm not telling you my score. It was not great. And I got into 3 Ivies. Just rack up the extracurricular.
And I will tell you this, I got a pretty good score on my own, and it amounted to nothing. It was all my student government and all my other awards that I won from the community for student of the year and whatever. Like I did a lot of extracurricular, and that's what got me into that college ultimately. So
Oh yeah, trauma is also a great thing. When your mom forces you to go to Russia at 13, a lot of doors open to you after that. So that also helped my applications.
I'm sure.
But as I said earlier, today's show would be the final and unfortunately short-lived entry into the adventures of the gang in Santa Monica. We'll need to discuss the events that led to the show receiving the green light.
So, after Man About the House ended its run, with the Chrissy character marrying Robin's brother in the finale, Robin got his own spin-off, Robin's Nest, where he moved in with his girlfriend, Vicky. Remember that name. In this new setting, they were an unmarried couple living above an abandoned Chinese food restaurant in a building owned by Vicky's father. Robin wants to marry Vicky, but she's scared from watching her parents go through a contentious divorce. Now, eventually, Robin would finally open his restaurant, Robin's Nest, which was the dream he'd mentioned all the way back in the pilot for Man About the House. Robin's Nest would run for 6 series, resulting in even more episodes than Man About the House. 48 episodes. It was more prolific than the original show. Now, Robin and Vicky would eventually get married and have twins, and in the finale, Vicky tells him that she's pregnant again. So, Will, Robin's Nest, what is your history with this show?
None. It was a thing I knew existed. You know, it was like, we talked about this in Man About the House. That's not a franchise that commonly made its way across the pond. It's not on public television. It wasn't picked up by like Comedy Central briefly. It's a thing we knew existed primarily from the Three's Company show credits telling you like based on the series, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, it's a thing. And honestly, Robin's Nest is a series that I really only learned about in the past few years. Like, I didn't even know that, like, it had kept growing over in the UK. I knew about Man About the House because Three's Company is always in syndication, but Three's a Crowd, like the Ropers that we discussed, those are separate syndication packages. So those were the shows I was chasing at 2 in the morning. I'm struggling to stay awake by the time the credits were rolling, so I didn't notice it say like based on Robin's Nest. Now, one thing I learned like while researching for all these shows, at some point in time, there was like a massive syndication package where all of the spin-offs were like titled to tie into Three's Company. So the Ropers was called Three's Company's Friends, comma, the Ropers. And then this was called, instead of Three's a Crowd, it was Three's Company, comma, 2. T-O-O, like in the song. That's not what I grew up with. I don't know if that's like the initial package, because by the time I was watching, they were like 3 separate deals going on. But as far as Robin's Nest, no clue. We probably should have watched some for this episode, but I didn't even seek them out.
Yeah, I didn't even think to do that either. That's a good point. But for me, like it's a big goose egg in Robin's Nest as far as I'm concerned. Because yeah, I didn't know that the show that it spun off from, even existed, that was what inspired Three's Company. So I have no point of reference for Robin's Nest, but that detail that it ran so much longer. And I would love to know, is it better regarded in the UK than, Man About the House, or are they equal? Like, I would love to know, because if it lasted that long, it must have been very popular. So was that ultimately like the more experienced version for the viewers on BBC?
Right. And also, we talked about that the Ropers, it would have caught Robin's Nest, but Mrs. Roper, the actress, passed away. So both spinoffs were very prolific, but didn't catch on in America when we tried it. So, like, by this point, ABC knew that sitcoms tended to run about 7 to 8 seasons, though they weren't quite ready to let go of one of their biggest stars in John Ritter, and adapted Mann's spinoff, Robin's Nest, as Three's a Crowd. The show would serve as a continuation of the Three's Company story, yet John Ritter would be the only series regular making the jump. Adam, what is your most vivid memory of Three's a Crowd?
So this is one where I go backwards on realizing it existed, because I only learned that Three's a Crowd existed earlier this year when I was watching this obscure 80s comedy movie called Stewardess School. It's on Tubi. Go find it. It featured a rare live action performance from Rob Paulson, who's the voice of Raphael on TMNT and Yakko on Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain. He was just at RetroCon this last weekend. And obviously so many more animated projects. We bring him up all the time. So I was like, what is he like when he was like performing in front of the camera? That's interesting. You know, spoiler, he plays basically a gay guy. You know, that's all it was. You know, it's just like stereotypical 80s gay guy joke. Anyway, but Mary Cadorette, who is from Three's a Crowd, we're going to get all into her place on the show. She is the star of the film. She is the titular stewardess. I mean, they're all training to be flight attendants, but she's like the main character. So it led me to look at her IMDb page because I really liked her. And I was like, what else does she do? I don't know her from anything. And then I see what? Why is John Ritter right there? And then I'm like, so I didn't know that there was a spinoff from Three's Company. And it's just so weird because, yeah, the concept of Stewardess School seems to have been inspired by her character's career on Three's a Crowd. Like they were trying to somehow, you know, build on this one season show. So I would love to get the behind the scenes on that, but that's as far as I go with any type of knowledge of Three's a Crowd.
I, just like with the Ropers, I would chase Three's a Crowd like late nights after some Guffy Rinker infomercial. That's when those spinoffs tended to air. I loved the theme song. I can't really, I basically won a contest at RetroCon singing the Three's Company theme song. I don't know the lyrics to Three's a Crowd all these years later because it doesn't come on enough.
I was saving this for years, but we're on it right now. This is the most generic 80s theme song you've ever heard. I'd listen to it every time I watched the episodes. You know, you can skip intro. I wouldn't skip it because I was like, there's got to be a hook here somewhere. There is not. It's like, marriage is fun.
They're side by side.
Yeah, I'm just like, what is this? This is nothing. When you come off an iconic theme song and you land on this, you're going to lose half the audience just because it tells them this is not as good. Just
yeah. Alan Thicke had nothing to do with this theme song, you know. But this is gonna get me laughed at so much. But whatever, we're vulnerable here. I thought Mary Cadorette was the most beautiful woman when I was a little kid. And there's a joke about my friends always talk about how 80s hot is 90s ugly. You know, it's if you go back and watch something that's core 80s, most of the time if they're oh, she's a real fox, and she looks like someone's mom. It was a different era. But Mary Cadorette is cut from the same cloth as Princess Diana. It's that look. She kind of had a similar bob. She's not just gorgeous, but she's the prettiest mom in the cul-de-sac. And that does something for me. It always has. I'm not trying to get a model. I'm trying to get the lady who bakes the best cookies at the PTA meeting. And because I never saw her, if you look at her IMDb, she popped up as a guest star here and there. She never really had a career. So now you mentioning this movie, I gotta see that because I didn't know that existed. But I have tried over the years, I want to know what she looks like now. She's not dead, but it's just kind of she disappears after a while. And I just thought for that moment in time, for 1984, she was the perfect woman to me.
Yeah, she had what it takes to really be something. I'm surprised, that sooner after that, she didn't maybe get her own series or something, even though Three's a Crowd didn't work out. Because I did do some more research. She was a beauty pageant contestant. She had done that, and she also had done theater and things like that. And it sounds like the reason she kind of phased out of acting is her mom got sick, and she went to go take care of her mom. And by that point, she kind of had just dropped out and would do regional theater and things like that, but she just didn't ever go back to Hollywood to pursue that career again, which is fine, I guess. You make your life choice, and hopefully she's just happy.
Well, I mean, this will probably come up in jeers, but it's like, she wasn't a great actress. Like, you could tell she did theater because that's how she approached it. Like, she wasn't a TV actress. She's very much regional dinner theater actress. Like, that was her chops. And Ritter almost outperforms her. But we'll get to that later.
I know. Yeah, we'll see if we have the same take on that. We got to figure out really what was the show about then and how did she fit in. But really, it's going to take us back to the end of Three's Company in our elevator pitch. Here's the deal. Three's a Crowd was somewhat hastily set up by the final episodes of Three's Company when Janet meets a handsome, wealthy man named Philip, who blew my mind when I saw him come on screen. He is the future host of Supermarket Sweep, David Ruprecht, who you see him in a sweater instantly. You're like, he should be wearing a Cosby sweater. So he is introduced to Janet because he is at the reading of the will of one of her longtime customers from her floral shop, and Philip becomes curious about this mystery woman who had meant so much to this uncle, and he asks her out on a date. Well, 3 episodes later, they're getting married in the Santa Monica apartment. There's like a whole episode like he doesn't want to get married in a church and all this stuff, and so they end up getting married in an apartment. And then Janet's parents, both of whom we've met over the course of the show, aren't present. At least was one of them or both of them in the Saved by the Bell wedding? I'm trying to remember. Is it just the dad in that one?
No, Mom. Like, they reluctantly showed up, but like they both made it in time. I'm not sure which dad. Like, I'm pretty sure it was normal dad, but like, same mom.
Not the Miss Bliss dad.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are changes brewing for the other roommates because Terry, out of nowhere, is considering a job offer in Hawaii. Really, like, it feels like there's time jumps all throughout the last few episodes. Like, has it been 3 weeks? Like, what's going on? So meanwhile, Jack is settling into his role as a business owner since Jack's Bistro has been open for about a year at this point. That was like a major part of the previous season, getting that all set up. So when he has a minor freak out on a flight, he catches the eye of an attractive flight attendant who manages to calm him down. And once they land, he invites her to come eat at his restaurant. But she has a boyfriend. Either way, though, a few nights later, he's closing up and notices her knock on the door, and they begin a whirlwind romance just as fast-paced as that of Janet and Philip. It is very rushed. They're just instantly in love and trust each other, and they're going to go with that. We'll talk about that later. When Terry accepts the Hawaii job and Janet and Philip move off to start their family, Jack is left wondering what's next. And it's at that point that Vicky suggests they figure it out together, and he thinks this means marriage, so he proposes and she doesn't accept. So just like in Robin's Nest, this Vicky was also very affected by her parents' divorce, and she loves Jack and tells him that she can't marry him, but that doesn't mean they can't be together. So obviously he's confused. Instead, she suggests that they live together, and Jack doesn't love this idea, but he figures he'd take it if it was the only way that he could be with Vicky. Just as a man living with 2 women was the controversial core of Three's Company, now Three's a Crowd would tackle the controversy of unmarried people living together. So that is the setup for Three's a Crowd. How did we get there? Well, the answer is very quickly and very conveniently.
Yeah. That moment right there kicks off Three's a Crowd. And I always made it a point to watch this episode in syndication, in the syndication package, because it features the Three's a Crowd logo bumping the Three's Company logo off screen. Basically like, it's my turn now, you know? So premiering in 1984, audiences would be introduced to the next phase of Jack Tripper's life. Would an old-fashioned guy really be able to live with a woman whom he loves in an unmarried arrangement? Meanwhile, other characters were added to the mix, such as Vicky's father, businessman James Bradford, played by Soap's Robert Manden. While Vicky and Jack live in an apartment over Jack's bistro, Mr. Bradford has bought the entire building from Mr. Angelino, making him Jack's new landlord. Meanwhile, Alan Campbell plays E.Z. Taylor, a stereotypical 80s surfer dude whom Jack hires as a chef for the restaurant. Mary Cadorette played Vicky, and the incomparable Jessica Walter played her mother, Claudia Bradford. The series, however, was unable to capture the Robin's Nest magic, as it seemed audiences weren't really interested in the further adventures of Jack Tripper. It would be canceled after 22 episodes at the end of the 84-85 TV season. John Ritter would stay in the ABC family, however, as his dramedy Hooperman would premiere in the 87-88 season.
Oh, wow. So that is a lot of setup. That is a lot of machinations that had to come together to make this work. Now, you have mentioned in the past briefly, Will, on the other episodes about Joyce DeWitt and her understanding or lack of understanding as to what was coming next after Three's Company. So just remind us here, why is Joyce DeWitt not a part of this? Because we do get a cameo from Larry at one point. So Richard Klein at least shows up.
Joyce DeWitt did not know there was going to be a spinoff. It was the network and the studio had conversations with Ritter in private. As far as Joyce DeWitt knew, they were all pulling into the station on this train they'd been on together for the past 8 years, and that was it. So then she got blindsided by the whole spin-off aspect, which we talked about it before, where there are a lot of points on the timeline where Joyce DeWitt was justifiably upset, because if she took the role based on how her character was portrayed in Man About the House, she would have been the second lead. She would have had a meatier role, but instead they kind of watered down what that character was. So now she's getting the shaft again, and she had just weathered the whole situation with Suzanne Summers. Apparently, Suzanne Summers and Joyce DeWitt didn't speak for roughly 30 years because of this whole situation. And Suzanne and John only made up right before John passed away. But it took more years for Joyce to forgive her.
Yeah, we should say there was a talk show that was hosted by Suzanne, and she brought on Joyce DeWitt, and they have a very kind of cordial conversation. It's not super lovey-dovey, but it's also, you kind of realize, you know what, even more than you asking for more money and rocking the boat and being a diva, it was the men that were against women wanting to rise up. That was kind of what they came at it from, is to say really we should have been united together, and producers really just didn't want women to succeed, which I don't know, based on the details you've told me with the whole how the pay structure would have worked, it sounds more financial than it was that. But
right.
That was their perception at the time.
Well, it's I've said that Joyce DeWitt is my favorite roommate, but I love Joyce DeWitt just as much as Little Will loved Mary Cadorette. I love Joyce DeWitt, and she's such a mysterious character to me because she really doesn't go on too much after Three's Company.
She stops pretty much.
She stops, but there are all these little tidbits that get dropped. She dated LeVar Burton post Roots. There's one picture out there. She dated LeVar Burton, and it only ended because her family wasn't cool with it. I need to know everything about that. But this was really messy because the conversations were just with John Ritter about the spinoff, and you can kind of tell because we say that everything gets wrapped up in 3 episodes, which is pretty much true, but if you treat the finale like a 1-hour episode, Janet's done after the first half. The wedding ends the first half. So it's the same way I tell people that the last NSYNC album is really just Justin Timberlake's tryout album. The second half of the series finale is really just the setup for Three's a Crowd. And it's so weird that the main cast don't even get a curtain call. We don't see any of them after minute 30.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, it's definitely, it just becomes, let's move into Three's a Crowd, let's get everything set up. And then the other side of it too is you have to look at, Joyce DeWitt, yeah, just kind of disappears from television. She does like one-off performances, like a decade later, she'll just like show up. But then also you think about John Ritter's career, you would think, oh, Three's a Crowd bombed, everybody's over John Ritter. No, like he has a great career after this. I mean, he never reaches the heights you would think that he should, but I mean, he's got the Problem Child movies, which were a surprise hit for everybody. He has so many different series that he gets to star in that we may have to cover Hooperman someday. We may have to talk about, what's that one where he lives in Washington or whatever?
Hearts of Fire with Marky Post.
Yeah, he keeps getting chances. And plus, like the It miniseries was a big one where, he's part of the cast there with lots of other famous TV faces. So I just feel like he was so beloved. Even right before he died, he was on a very popular series.
The 80s are weird, though, in that the biggest stars on TV could not make that jump to movies. We could talk about Stay Tuned. I've still never seen it.
What?
I wanted to simply because of the scene in the trailer of Three's Company.
Right.
But then it's like Ted Danson really didn't do it. I was talking recently about like 3 Men and a Baby had two of the biggest stars on television at the time, and it did not start movie careers for either of them. Like Clooney becomes a star, but Clooney was never really a star of a show. He was always like supporting cast member, so he slipped under the radar. The biggest example is probably Bruce Willis, but otherwise, Bill Cosby, even though he was America's Dad, this is before we knew all the stuff, and he like kept NBC afloat. Ghost Dad?
Yeah. Leonard Part 6 or whatever? Yeah. Mother Jugs and Speed, whatever it's gonna be. Like he tried like from the moment he was anything. I mean, and again, like you gotta remember he had I Spy and all that during the 60s. So like he was trying to make movies in the 70s and be hip and cool. And yeah, nobody wanted it. So yeah, it was a hard transition, but we have to see how was the transition from one show to another for John Ritter. So why don't we see what we liked about it in our Cheers. Just to echo what we already said, I will just start out with one exception that I will get to in Cheers. The cast is wonderful in this, and I think they have great chemistry. Like this is a very solid, again, where the Ropers did not work for me in that way at all. I just felt it was very uneven. Mary Cadorette as Vicky, I find her, this is where I'm in a little bit of opposition to you, to be like the perfect companion on screen to John Ritter. Like I think she is a good actress that holds her own with him. She's sweet and funny, but also smart and tough. She has like all the different sides, but she does it without being a nag, like so many sitcom girlfriends or wives. I feel like it's always very like understandable, her position, and then it gets resolved. It's not like she's bullying him into getting her way or anything. It's misunderstandings, and then, oh, let's tell the truth to each other, or let's talk about our feelings. Oh, okay, well, great. Now, of course, I still love you. I was just upset for a minute. So I really like the reality of their relationship. It feels like she shares a lot of the plots with Jack. It's not just the Jack Tripper show. Same with like, her dad. I think that Robert Manden, I don't know him from anything. Like I did not see Soap. We've talked about this in the past, and Benson and all these other shows I just never experienced, but he is like perfectly ridiculous, the blustery authority figure, whether he's hassling Jack about ways to improve the restaurant's earning power, or he comes in that he's babying Vicky, or to me, he's silly and he plays it like 25% less goofy than Harvey Korman would have, because he is great value Harvey Korman, is he not?
Yes, I was gonna say, I love Robert Manden, and like to the point where like he has been my takeaway from Three's a Crowd. Like even though like, yeah, I loved Mary Cadorette, like Robert Manden was someone like if I saw in TV Guide he was gonna show up in something, I would watch it. It's like you're saying, he's not as farcical as a Harvey Korman would be, because a lot of that's from like Soap. You gotta remember remember, Soap is a sitcom, but they had to lean into it because it's really just a parody of soap operas. So, like, he does that here. Like, he has humor to him, but, like, he's not gonna break. And I love his relationship with Vicky. I love the contentious relationship with Claudia. Like you were saying, the cast here is great. The only one, and it's not a jeer, I mean, you just had to have him at this point. Easy was like network notes. You can tell where it's like, well, the kids love this surfing, so we'll have this blonde guy. Cause he's not even, you know how I said like 80s hot is like 90s ugly? I don't even know if like this guy would have been like Tiger Beat material. Like in terms of casting, you could have at least made him hot. Were surfer guys not hot? Were they just kind of like shredded with the long hair, but girls didn't really find them attractive? Like I have problems with that character. And he kind of disappears, I would say, so they never really get to flesh him out.
Yeah, I mean, again, I will give a more forceful opinion in jeers of Easy. But getting back to Jessica Walter, again, when you bring in a character halfway through the series, it's like, oh, here's the Hail Mary, like we need somebody. But Jessica Walter is so good as the ex-wife. She gives Robert Manden so much more to do. He was already great, and now he has a whole new dimension to play on, and they are a wonderful bickering comedic duo. It's the insults are just great, like, and they are biting. This is what I actually liked, is this show is a little bit edgy, and not just in like an innuendo way. Like they take some risks, like they say the word ass, you know, like there's an episode where Jack becomes a celebrity chef and he serves on a shingle to these people, but they bleep it out, you know, with a foghorn on a boat.
Right.
That phrase, and if people of the day knew that phrase of that dish, which is actually food that I love, that is a comfort food for me. But it was just so funny to me. Like they would do stuff like that. We're like, wow, okay. They're like, it's the 80s, and we could do a little bit more. And I thought that was another distinction from Three's Company. And again, not in a bad way, where it felt like totally like offensive, but you're like, wow, okay, they're gonna give it a little extra oomph.
Yeah, and another thing I liked was how Jack is the same Jack. He's got new challenges. He didn't really like change himself in any way. He's still like the physical comedian goofball, but now he's dealing with like next stage of life problems. Like when you think back to Three's Company, he had never been in a relationship. You know, it's like he might date a girl twice. You know, that kind of thing. And maybe that's just what you did then. But it's like you're watching him learn what a relationship is. And like Vicky is teaching him based on what she knew from her experience or from watching her parents' experience. He went from like Mr. Love 'em and leave 'em, not in a cad way like Larry, but like now we have to see who Jack is when they stick around. And I liked that aspect of the show.
Yeah, for example, there's an episode where they play a trivia game, you know, and it turns out that she's way smarter than him. You know, at least she knows a lot of trivia. And then they go to a carnival because he thinks he's going to show off, well, I got the physical skills, and she's better at knocking down the bottles with the baseball. And so he's feeling emasculated, and he has to have this whole like humbling experience to realize, does it matter? Like we love each other, right? Like you're good at some things, I'm good at whatever it's going to be. Like that there are these great dynamics that do lean more into drama. Sometimes you could tell John Ritter wanted to stretch a little bit because there's some uncomfortable moments of like new marriage relationship. I'll just say I could relate a lot because my wife and I got engaged after dating for 3 months. We got married after 6. You don't really know somebody that well after that amount of time, and we didn't live together before we got married. So it was a situation where like you're getting into this and it's like, oh, I didn't realize, you know, my wife has told me this many times, I thought you were this person. I was like, I know, but that's who I was at that moment in time, and life has changed, you know, like, so I really loved seeing that play out because it was something I was familiar with. But getting back to the physical comedy, I'll just say the physical comedy is toned down by comparison to Three's Company, but even with just the lesser use for the physical comedy, having watched The Ropers, it makes you realize what an important element of the Three's Company formula that was missing, really what John Ritter could bring to the table. So that's a big thing for me, because you said he's the same Jack Tripper. I might have a contention to that in jeers, but I think that the familiarity and then the evolution of the character is welcome. I think there's a lot that he brings to the table in this series that is a new element that maybe he didn't get to grow very much on Three's Company, like you said. No relationships long term, stuff like that.
Now, see, I related to this show, and it's funny because I haven't done like a full watch through in a while, and I probably should, but I related to it because I was coming from like the same place in that now we're going to have like RGS After Dark. My wife wanted us to live together, and I was like, I don't do that. Like, that's not how I was raised. Like, and people are laughing like, ha ha ha, our listeners right now. But it's true. I was just like, my mom, she's not going to like that, you know? But it's like, women always win. So yeah, we ended up living together, and now I'm like, I would think of Jack at some points in time where I was like, so this is how he felt in Three's a Crowd, you know? Because like, there's just this traditional understanding of like, we get engaged, and like, maybe after we're engaged and we're saving money for the wedding, but no ring? Like, who's on the lease? You know? So like, it's more relatable than like the landlord misheard something through the pipes and now you gotta like correct him, you know? Like,
Yeah.
It's not as just slapstick.
Well, since this is kind of half and half for me, I'm going to put this as a bridge to Jeers, because they correct it after about the first 3 episodes. But what initially turned me off to Three's a Crowd, and I thought I was going to hate it, was that they do reinvent Jack Tripper for this series in a way, in that final episode of Three's Company, as they're wrapping things up, because it rang very false to me that he says, well, I'm a real traditional guy. I'm a traditional romantic. I would never just live with a woman, because there is an episode in Three's a Crowd where he meets up with an old girlfriend at Larry's party, and he's like, well, I'm living with a woman now. Things have changed. And she's like, well, you must be slowing down because you used to live with 2. And obviously there was no hanky-panky there, but then he was definitely a guy who was hooking up with a lot of women over and over again, and it's all he talked about. And all of a sudden now he's a prude. Now he's afraid to be in bed with this woman he's in a committed relationship with, even though they're not married. Like, there's just a lot of stuff there where I'm just like, this is not Jack Tripper for these first few episodes. And then they get over that. They stop hitting on that.
But see, there was no hanky-panky. Now, this is where we probably should have watched Robin's Nest, because that guy was a man. You know, like we talked about, whereas like, there's a lot to the Jack Tripper lore that doesn't match Jack Tripper in execution. Like I was saying, I don't believe he boxed in the Navy. There's nothing about that guy who boxed in the Navy. But like, to him, the like living arrangement was completely platonic. And I do think of him as like an aw shucks old-fashioned guy. Maybe it's because like he's related to Tex Ritter and I'm giving him like all this like credit he hadn't earned. But like, I believed it because he wasn't in relationships with any of those women he went out on dates with. And this is gonna sound really naive. It is. I understand it before I say it. But for all of the skirt chasing and as horny as he was, we have no real proof he slept with any of those women. After every date he came home, he wasn't pulling all-nighters anywhere because he knew it would be disrespectful to Janet and Chrissy because he was that old-fashioned guy. Now, we have to assume that, like, it's the 70s and 80s and he's a man and doing all this stuff, but it's the same way, like, pop culture has taught us that, like, traveling businessmen always have affairs. They always have a family across the country and a different social security number because there's no internet then. It's the same here. It's like, we're meant to fill in some blanks, but he never had a relationship more than like 3 episodes. And they would recycle women and give them new names. People just kept coming back. The mom from Mr. Belvedere, you know, like all these random like starlets, but he didn't know how to have a relationship. So I thought it did make sense that he was like shy about being with Vicky because he doesn't know how to be a relationship guy. Now, I will say though, it's weird he would have proposed to her and been in that frame of mind. Now, I know a lot of people like love makes people do crazy things, but I've always been of the mindset. That's why I don't understand how like people get their like proposals rejected. If you think there's a chance she's gonna say no, you probably shouldn't be proposing. I'm not trying to be like a youth group leader, but like that's just always been my mentality. Like if there's the like guys are always nervous, and I get that it's a big deal and it might only happen once, you don't know, but like yes, there's nerves in this life change, but the fear of like, is she going to accept? If there is like greater than 30% chance that she's gonna say no, it's too soon, or she's not the right one. So it did feel like his proposal at the end of Three's Company is a bit impulsive. It's to put his like claws in her so she doesn't get away, but then Three's a Crowd is showing him what that actually means, like what a relationship truly is. It isn't just getting a beer at the Regal Beagle and then getting her home by 11. That change is what's interesting to me, but this also happens at the same time you were talking about those first 3 episodes. It's funny, I found the New York Times review for the premiere of Three's a Crowd, and it was scathing because they said that like if you want more of John Ritter doing the same thing he's been doing 8 years, then you won't be disappointed, which is a shame because he seems like he'd have a lot of potential to be the Cary Grant of his generation.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. See, yeah, that's interesting that was their feeling. I mean, he's the same character, so he has to be somewhat the same. Even, you can't really fault him for that. But where I ultimately landed is what you said, is that he could have been all talk. All those years, he's covering up the fact that he's not a ladies' man. Like, he's a nice guy that a lot of girls want to go out with once, but as far as the actual hooking up, that maybe is just not what he is looking for, and he never found true love, and he finds Vicky and it works, even though it's very forced and you don't see any evidence why they should like each other just because they got locked in an airplane bathroom together for 5 minutes. So like none of that works, but at the same time, she is so wonderful. I just thought Janet is getting married and he is worried about what's my next step in life. And he basically says that when he proposes to her. And then, yeah, he's just like, well, let's just do it. We love each other. Why wouldn't we? And it is impulsive, but ultimately, I think to him, it's just like, okay, yeah, I guess this is who I really am now that it's all on the line. So we've been seeing, the guy who just didn't have to think about those things for 8 seasons. And now he has to think about those things. He's like, oh, actually, I'm not ready. So I totally buy that by the end, but it still just didn't feel like the original Jack Tripper. I will say that as they write the series too, I do like the premises. I think there's a lot of like standard sitcom premises. I would say half the episodes are good, half are just kind of generic. But I think overall the writing is very sharp. Again, in comparison to the Ropers that felt really lazy and boring. And again, a lot of it, they were just adapting existing teleplays, from George and Mildred in the UK. Like this one, I'm sure they adapted a fair amount as well. But I just felt like there was a lot of good writing where I was just like, okay, I like this element. And I like that. Like they brought in one of Jack's old Navy buddies and things like that, or, oh, here's Vicky's girlfriend who's coming in. And, like Jack thinks that she has the hots for him. It's a lot of misunderstandings, which is the standard farcical nature of a Three's Company show. So there's plenty of that going on. But the last thing I'll just say is I did like also the intimacy of the show that again felt real. There's a lot of scenes of them in their bedroom. There's a lot of scenes of Vicky undressing, and Jack undressing, and like having a whole scene play out while they're getting dressed. And you're just like, wow, like they're really bringing us into their private life while this is going on. It feels different than just they're always on a living room set or they're always on the restroom. That would be real intimate. The bedroom set is something that really takes you into a new sphere that's not just like the couple sitting in a bed under the sheets holding books and talking about what they learned.
And they didn't have like twin beds.
Yeah.
Like that brings me to another jeer though.
Boo! Boo! Boo!
I get Jack is older and he has responsibilities as like a business owner, but my jeer is costuming because now he wears jackets and ties when he used to wear button downs and vests. Every episode is like, are you going to court? Because that's not the laid back look that we were used to from Three's Company. So it's stupid, but like that's something that always sticks out to me because you were pretty much done with jeers. My big jeer is the pacing. In a perfect world, this would have been seeded through 6 episodes at the end of Three's Company and not 3. Mm-hmm. 3 really rushes it because, like you're saying, we don't know how much time has passed. Clearly enough to set up a wedding, but it's not a fancy wedding. It's almost a shotgun wedding, which is interesting because that's how the show started. It makes you wonder why they didn't go that route. But like Janet and Philip really do treat it like they're on the clock to get married, yet the plot never provides any explanation on why we're just rushing to the finish line. And so like we've watched this in other shows before where it's like you introduce this character and they kind of hang around, maybe a red herring, and then they start to get woven into plots and you realize, oh, this person's sticking around. They needed twice as long to bring up this Terry job, to actually have Janet go on more than 2 dates with Philip, you know? Like that pacing is just really crazy to me. So that's ideally what I would have liked from that.
I would agree. Like that definitely, none of it felt natural. None of it felt believable. It really felt like we need to get to a new series because we just want to keep this train rolling. But the biggest miscalculation for me on this series is their Fonzie. The surfer dude, EZ, he angered me every time he was on screen. I'm like, get this guy out of here. He is ruining the chemistry of the show because not only was his comedic tone so far away from what the main characters were doing, his surfer accent in the parlance is a total wipeout. Like, it is bad. Is he Southern? Is he a Valley dude? Is he British sometimes? This guy couldn't settle on what he was trying to be, and it's really grating to listen to because it'd be like, whoa, that's crazy. I didn't think that was what was happening here. And then later it's like, wait, is that British or is that a surfer guy? I don't know what you're doing. And like, here's the thing. He's obviously doing Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. That was the breakout character. And then every series had, like you said, had to have some sort of surfer. There's even an episode where a girl comes in from the beach who's a total Valley girl surfer. Yeah. She's doing a better voice than him. I wish she had stayed on the series. She was awesome.
And they have like their own language. And Jack is like the old fogey who's like, I have no clue what they say to each other, you know? But you give him too much credit calling him the Fonzie. That's an elite role. Urkel is a Fonzie. This guy is a Bubba. That's what this is. This guy is a mama's family Bubba.
It was flabbergasting to me to learn that he worked again, but I think he was just miscast in this role because he had a recurring role apparently on Jake and the Fat Man.
Yes.
For like the whole run of that series. And that was just a few years later. So I think maybe he had just had the haircut and the tan at the time. So they're like, yeah, let's grab this kid over here and put him in. Like, I don't know why he was cast, but he is likable enough, but terribly annoying. Like, I don't hate the character as written. I don't think he's not a jerk. He's just annoying and he doesn't fit. Like, it's supposed to be like, oh yeah, I live in a van. He's Cody from Step by Step. He lives in a van behind the restaurant and he just walks into work every day. Yeah, I mean, that's his deal.
He just doesn't call anybody Dana Burger.
But Sasha did a better surfer dude accent than this guy does.
Yeah, but Sasha did a lot of bad stuff.
Allegedly.
But this is such a weird aside. But like you mentioned how he did a stint in Jake and the Fat Man. And I only recently learned that Jake and the Fat Man is the reason we have like the NCIS franchise.
Really?
Because Jake and the Fat Man spawns JAG, which then spawns NCIS, which makes me wonder if he pops up currently.
That would be amazing.
But yeah, no, like he sucks. It's weird that he's there from the beginning because he seems like he'd be added later from network notes. You know, where it's like, we got to bring in like some kids, even though this isn't kid humor. I mean, Three's Company in and of itself isn't really kid humor, but you're right. I don't know why he's there. And I think I have a solution.
Okay.
But it's back to a cheer though, even though we're in jeers, where I still think, like, even though there were some, we talked about there could have been changes in Jack, I feel ultimately, though, when he found himself in a relationship, like a serious relationship, and learning like the ins and outs, he was realistic about it. And like you said, the show handles it realistically. I can't stand when like a fan favorite character gets in a relationship and then like their whole characterization goes out the window. And this is a moment for me to rant about Boy Meets World.
Oh no.
Boy Meets World is a great 2-season show. And the minute Corey starts dating Topanga, he becomes this like nebbishy, neurotic, like Woody Allen Jr., where you're like, this doesn't need to air after Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Like, I don't like this anymore. And it only gets worse. Like, they go to college and he gets more neurotic and they get married and you're like, why is Topanga even with him? Like, even when Jack has his like insecurity, we know where it's coming from, Vicky understands where it's coming from, and they work through it. But I still recognize Jack Tripper from the series finale of Three's a Crowd, where they're filming an airline commercial. He's the same Jack Tripper we met in a bathtub in 1977, and I appreciate that.
I would agree. I think that they managed to keep him consistent, and ultimately, you know, there's not like a big wrap up because I think they expected to get a season 2, so it's just an episode and we're done.
And it's not even a great episode, because keep in mind, Who Shot JR hasn't permeated television yet. Shows used to just like in their order. A season finale was not a thing till like 86, 87 for you to have an event. Otherwise, it's like, well, that's it. See you in September.
Yep.
So,
their life is just continuing on, but you don't get to see it. Yeah.
right.
And I do think, you know, that there is growth from the characters as well throughout the series, though. There is an evolution, which is also commendable. But yeah, obviously we've gone back and forth between cheers and jeers. This is a show that can be a little conflicting because you're like, I like it, but not this little piece over here, but I really do like it. But we have to determine then, how do we help even it out? Ready to continue on for a few more seasons as the Show Doctors. So I gotta hear about this idea, because obviously, just like with the Ropers last time around, I want to ditch a cast member. I want to ditch a whole family there. In this case, obviously, easy, you gotta go. You gotta hit the surf and just take it on out, you know? But what is your idea? Because I know who I would replace him with, but maybe we're on the same page.
All right, so this whole, like, this is not a complicated Show Doctors to me, because this is 1985 at this point. I'm going to prescribe what I usually prescribe. We're going to send it to first run syndication, just like they were going to do with 3 Apartments. But the only thing I changed with the show, because I'm fine with the show, except for EZ. We get rid of EZ. We say he decided to like follow like Fish on tour, or he's in the surfing championship circuit, something like that, something to write him off. I love continuity, and I like an overlap. Every spinoff needs a Worf. You need that character from the last show to like bridge to the new show. For help in the kitchen, I would bring back the Felipe character.
Yes, that is mine as well. Yes.
Because he brings something to the show. I can't even like really describe it. He's not a foil for Jack, but he keeps Jack on his toes. Like, I think at the end of the day, they're work friends. I'm not gonna say they're friends, but they're work friends. But Felipe has sabotaged Jack time and time again. So you could do a lot with him there. Maybe maybe Mr. Bradford brings in Felipe. Like, hey, Tripper, I heard you needed help at the restaurant, and Angelino recommended this guy. And Jack's like, Felipe? He's like, I ain't Jack. You know, like, and then it's just kind of like, if this were like an 86, 87 Fox show, this is when the studio audience is just hooping and hollering for nothing because they recognize Felipe. But like, EZ doesn't figure into most plots in a major way. So like, Felipe wouldn't, you get the same interaction from a Felipe for like what you need, but I still think at the end of the day, it gives some diversity to the show, you know, at a time when they're not even looking for that. But like, I don't think Felipe is like a caricature. He's not like Julio on like Sanford and Son, who has a goat and makes menudo in a pot. You know, like Felipe just happened to be Latino, but he was a good kind of like kitchen assistant, and you never know. He's a wild card. You never know which way he's gonna go. So some episodes he's on Jack's side, some episodes he's on Mr. Bradford's side. Maybe he's flirting with Vicky every now and then. Just meaningless flirting, but just kind of like, let's run away and I'll give you a life that you'll never forget, or something like that. You know, like I bring in Felipe and we do this in first run syndication, and that's all.
Felipe is what we were missing 100%, because like to me, Easy is a dumb dog and he doesn't add anything. He's just like cute and he's around. And so you just send him off to, you know, that ranch up in Montana, you know, he's just running around up there. He's so happy. But yeah, Felipe would be awesome. Now, the only other element that I thought it could use is there is one episode where Vicky's ex-boyfriend has a competing restaurant to Jack's. And I think it would be fun not to keep that guy around, but that idea of having like a recurring snooty rival restaurateur. You got to have something for Jack to be working towards at this point, because he already got his dream. He got his restaurant. So what's the threat now? Well, there's somebody else who's trying to put him out of business, and intentionally so. And they're having fun. They're sniping. They're coming, you know, whatever it is. So I'm thinking it's funny you mentioned Boy Meets World, because I'm thinking William Daniels, so that he would have like a live action job in addition to playing Kit at the time.
Well, it's St. Elsewhere.
Oh, that's true. Okay. But you could bring back Stuart Pankin, who played the TV commercial director on the final episode of the series, but make him grow like a pencil-thin mustache. He's like the physical opposite of Jack also. And so I think like it would just be fun. It doesn't have to be every single episode is about that, but like, you know, half the season is kind of like these restaurant wars, and Felipe could go back and forth. Like there could be a fun element there. Like it's either that or, you know, Vicky needs to get a new job, because I think the flight attendant thing is kind of boring. Like it comes up, she's always coming in, but they never did anything with it really. It's not like they have a travel episode or she, you know, brings in people from other countries. Like nothing happened.
But see, when you take it to syndication around season 3, which would put them 87, 88, everybody went to Hawaii. So then you do your like sponsored trip to Hawaii. But now that we are in the era of the cliffhanger season finale, I say at the end of season 4, we have a plane crash like cliffhanger where like maybe Vicky didn't get on the plane, but Jack doesn't know. But it ends with us not knowing. We just know the plane went down, which is the same way the new WKRP in Cincinnati ended. But the next season premiere, we find out Vicky's safe and everything, but Jack begs her to get a new job. Vicky agrees, and then maybe she opens like a bakery or like a tchotchke shop that used to be a bakery that burned down, you know?
Interesting.
Because we're just stealing from people at this point anyway. You just brought up Gary's Bar and Grill from Cheers, because that's the same dynamic, you know? And I mean, Stuart Pankin is basically prototypical Ernie Sabella. So yeah. It's like, it works. You know,
yeah, like, definitely.
I like it.
The only other thing I was going to say, though, is, you know, 4th season, if it's not going well, when you said the plane crash, I immediately thought, you know, they decide to go on a second honeymoon or something, and they crash. And now it's Gilligan's Island, but it's Tripper's Island. Now they just totally changed the premise completely of the show to see if anybody wants that, like Joe versus the volcano, the series, you know?
That's the finale I would give it if I knew we were getting canceled.
Yeah.
Because that's the one you leave fans with of like, so what's gonna happen now? And then there's all the like fanfic.
TV movie 5 years later.
Right. The early fanfic of like, this is day 3 on the island, you know?
All right. So as we're wrapping up here, we've done Come and Knock on Our Pod. It's been 3 episodes of Three's Company. The question I have for you is, are you glad that the spin-offs exist? Or do you feel like Three's Company just needed to be what it was and it was fine? Like, do they tarnish or enhance the reputation of the series, in your opinion?
I'm glad they exist. I wish there had been more from both of them, but I'm glad they exist. I don't think they tarnish because it's the next evolution of these characters. It's the next stage. They didn't pull like the Connors where they had to retcon certain things to make it work. It's one of those things of, if you want to, you can end your fandom with Three's Company. If you were there for Jiggle TV and this guy living with 2 girls, that's over. And you weren't getting that from Three's a Crowd. Because, I mean, Vicky had shoulder pads and uniforms. So it wasn't that kind of show. But if you were interested in like, well, I really like John Ritter. He never really disappoints me. Let's see where this goes. Because honestly, and maybe that was to its detriment, Three's a Crowd, even though it has a different kind of plot, tonally, it's the same show. You said it gets edgy at times and it takes advantage of the fact that it's in the 80s, and it does. But I even feel like Three's Company gets a bad rap as Jiggle Vision because I think that ends when Suzanne Summers leaves.
Yeah.
You know, they don't make Janet do that. They don't make Cindy do it. They really don't make Terry do it. But like, that's what put them on the map, and that's kind of like its legacy. But if you really watch the whole series, you won't be like shocked by Vicky and how they handle things there. And even in the Ropers, it was a natural progression. Like, it wouldn't have made sense if they had followed through with the original gentleman's agreement of like, oh, if it fails, you can come back to Three's Company. They could have done it. They could have been like, oh, well, we missed you guys too much. And the audience would be like, okay, whatever. Like, we didn't ask questions back then. But like, we now have an extra, what is it, like 28 episodes of Roper adventures that we might not have had. So I don't think either of them hurt them. And like, I'm also fine with them being open-ended because it was a different era of television. If it were now, you'd be like, well, they didn't even give it an ending. What does an ending look like? I mean, for Three's a Crowd, Jack and Vicky eventually get married because, I mean, that's what happened in Robin's Nest.
Yeah.
But does that change anything? Because like in American TV, when you have the kids, it ruins everything. Like, they would have had to end it with, like, the series finale would have had to be her giving birth to the twins. They couldn't have had the season of Jack as a dad and all this stuff. So I like that they exist. I wish we had gotten more, but they don't hurt Three's Company for me. What about you?
Well, no, yeah, I agree with you. I feel like they are definitely a nice little bonus, but they're not necessary. But I think that it's nice that they did a decent job on both. You know, even though the Ropers I like less than Three's a Crowd, I don't think it's not like the Brady Bunch where they couldn't let that franchise go. They kept doing it. The Bradys, the Brady Wives, all the TV movies, the variety show, like just they did so much like to keep bringing them back, and each time it was worse. So it was just like, let's try it. Okay, it didn't work. Let's just let it go. And I think it is a nice bonus for fans of the series who want that. Although when you say that they'd eventually have to have, you know, the twins, I think they might have to have, you know, 2 sets of twins or something, you know, because I think you're gonna have to name them after Janet and Chrissy. Then you're gonna have to name one Cindy. You're gonna have to name one Terry, you know, and then maybe a Larry. Maybe they have, you know, quintuplets, you know, like I just feel like that would be the crazy thing. You know,
Right, because had it lasted like in in that timeline, Joyce DeWitt's legs contract has ended, and she agrees to come back, and Richard Klein comes back. Maybe Suzanne takes a break from She's the Sheriff and calls in, and we're like, hey, she's calling in again, you know?
Yeah, well, and I will just say, like, I looked at interviews from John Ritter post Three's Company, like whether he was on Conan or being interviewed about his, like, Hooperman or what other shows, and you could tell that he was ready to never come back to Three's Company. I'm sure even in Stay Tuned, the bit about, you know, the fake Janet and Chrissy coming through the door when he hops to that channel, he did not want to do. And they're like, you have to do it. You have to do this, John. So to me, like, I think he appreciates what it did for his career, but he was never going to be someone who allowed it to continue. Like, because he would be the holdout. He would be the Bill Murray almost, you know, like just like, I don't want to do it. Then when it finally happens, you're like, it wasn't worth the wait. So I think it is good that it is what it is and where it is in history. And I think, you know, everybody got to have, you know, their lives and their careers as they wanted them to be, even if Joyce DeWitt took a break from TV for a while. But yeah, so here's the thing. Well, we are going to be doing for our next episode, Batman Beyond. So a great series that has a lot of interesting history to it. So that is going to be our next episode. So that is something to look forward to. Stay subscribed and keep spreading the word. And we are already lined up a lot of other shows that we want to be talking about in the future as well. It's just a matter of let's get to them. But that will be our next one out of the gate now that Come and Knock on Our Pod has come to a close. So thank you again for being a part of this series and joining us. And we hope that you will stay connected with us on social media at Remember Show Pod. Remember that is where you can find the links to actually stream the shows where they are available for free. Batman Beyond, I think you're going to have an HBO Max subscription if you haven't seen it in the past. But either way, something a little bit more contemporary, getting into the world of animation once again. But Will, remind them where they can find you on social media.
I am at William B. West, or you can find me at westweekever.com.
And I am at Hoju Koolander on all the socials. We hope that you will join us. But until next time, we're changing the channel.
This has been a presentation of Geekster Media.